Coming up in this video, you have a podcast, you're doing it well, but should you put it on YouTube? It's a question that a lot of people are asking right now. Do I need to move my podcast onto YouTube? And can I do it audio only, or do I have to have video? Well, the options are there for you. You can maybe do one or the other. We'll talk about the benefits to doing one versus the other. Maybe why you don't want to be on YouTube at all. Spoiler, we put this podcast on YouTube. We're going to talk about it coming up.
Here at Third Wheel Media, we help you navigate the world of radio, podcasting, and video so that you can hit a home run with your content. On this podcast, we'll give you a behind-the-scenes look at what we do. This is Rounding Third, Conversations in Modern Media.
Welcome into Rounding Third, Conversations in Modern Media. I'm Ben George with Walter Storholt here at Third Wheel Media. And it's a conversation today. I think it's a good one. You're hopefully watching on YouTube. You might be listening to the audio version of the podcast. But we're having this discussion, Walter, because the question has seemingly come up a lot the last year or two is, do I need to be on YouTube? And I think not beyond what we do every day, I just think the industry as a whole is having this discussion. Like, what is a podcast? Is it audio only, or is there video elements to it? Like, what exactly is a podcast? So should I be putting it on YouTube?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to go back to a world where we knew what a podcast really was, like where people can define it. So I went to a big podcasting, the big national podcasting event that they do each year. I went to the one this year. It happened to be in Denver, so it was right down the road, which was pretty cool. So I got to go to a bunch of different sessions, and I was blown away by how nobody could define what a podcast was. Pretty apparent that like the definition's out the window at this point because of the mix of short form video, of YouTube having a big presence, and just this whole conversation of like, well, then is it a podcast still if it has video? Is it a podcast if it's only 5 minutes long? Is it a podcast if it's 3 hours long? Is it a podcast if it's one person versus multiple people talking? That debate in the podcasting world has kind of been going on since the start, but at least it was kind of obvious that a podcast was, radio on demand via the internet. Like you can serve it to somebody, but it kind of still followed that traditional model of a little bit of a radio show, but in a different, less formal way and easier to access. Now it's so different because of all the different video influence, people can't define it. So I don't think we're going to go back in the direction of being able to define it clearly. It's going to have a muddied presence as we go into the future. So just have that context as we have the conversation today.
Yeah, we won't be as philosophical on the whole what is a podcast discussion here, but we want to try to answer a question that you might have, and that's, do I need to take my podcast, which I'm doing already, and put it on YouTube? Or maybe you are doing a podcast, but you might launch in one. Should I launch it with it on YouTube as well? Because naturally, it's much easier just to go ahead and start the audio version, do it that way. It's easier edit time. It's easier to upload. Just the process is a little simpler. So YouTube adds a different element. So let's just start then, Walter, with some of the conversation that we would have with someone. This comes in and says, okay, guys, we've been doing a podcast. I'm enjoying it, like the show, but this but could go any different directions. I'll just use one example. But I know that another advisor or someone else that I know has been doing their show on YouTube and having a lot of success. So should I put my show on YouTube as well? So let's just kind of walk through some of those initial questions that we would ask them.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think the big thing would be, are you wanting to just put your audio only podcast on YouTube, or are you actually wanting to now have a video podcast because you're going to be on YouTube, which we all know is a video space. So two very different conversations once that comes up. So I guess let's tackle the audio only one first, or really that's what leads us to then start asking questions back to the client to see what's the right fit for them. So like one of the questions I'll ask is like, okay, yeah, are you wanting to make this transition into a video podcast, or are you just trying to put that audio only show on YouTube just to have another distribution channel? And when that's the answer of, yeah, I just, where our podcast is on Apple and Spotify and these other places, and I just hear that I should be on YouTube now. And that's true. Like YouTube's can be a really good place, even for an audio only show. YouTube has a lot of benefits. You get some increased searchability. You're in one of the largest search engines out there when you start putting your show on YouTube. So could it bring you increased exposure? Well, it never hurts. I shouldn't say never. Most of the time, it doesn't hurt to be everywhere, right? There's not a whole lot of different podcasting apps out there that we would say, don't be on that app. It's going to hurt your show. It's another place to be, even the more obscure apps. Yeah, why not be out there? It's that much more searchability and visibility. The downside risks are not great, if at all existent, in some of those cases. A lot of people are driven to YouTube, Ben, by monetization opportunities, but then that kind of gets the reality check, I think, going and helps shape this conversation a little bit better when people maybe have that as their goal or their target.
That is often the reason for it. I think for many people is maybe I can create a new revenue stream, but it takes work to get to that point, and that's something that really doesn't even need to be part of the initial discussion, right? If you want to get onto YouTube, it shouldn't be about making money right away. You have to be, I think, committed to doing it the right way, committed to doing it for a reasonable amount of time, if not a long amount of time. And I even go, before I even really dive into that, I would even go back up a step and say, do you have a channel yet? Because if you have a channel, right, and it seems like a basic question, but if you have a channel, then I think it makes more sense, right? It doesn't mean it's an automatic thing, but I think it makes more sense. You're adding to the content you're doing. If you want to start a YouTube channel just to move your audio podcast onto there, sure. If you want to automate it to where you publish it onto one platform and automatically goes to YouTube, it's not going to take you any time. Just lower your expectations. Don't expect to get a whole lot out of it, but it will be there, right? That's kind of one part. It's like when you start a Twitter account just to start sharing links to something you're doing. You're not going to get any traction out of that. It's just not going to work. You have to be active there. So that would be kind of a question there is, do you want to, or do you have the channel established yet? Or are we starting a new one? Which is fine to start a new one to create the show and put it there, but it will take more work. You need to do probably a little bit more there and probably need to commit to doing some video, which may be kind of getting ahead of us a little bit. But going back to your original question of the monetization, Walter, I think you have to commit. I even say 6 months. You think 6 months is fair? Like at least commit to doing 6 months worth of podcasts on YouTube to see what the results are going to be.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you're monetizing after 6 months either. That just means you're going to start to see if you could accomplish that goal down the line at some point. That might be a year or 2 years into producing shows. Obviously, tons of variables to tell how fast that initial growth is going to be. But I think that's a great thing to kind of put out there for somebody, is at least do a true YouTube video podcast strategy. Give it 6 months to see if it's worth doing. If we're back to talking about just the audio podcasts, I think it's fine to put the show out there. Just don't expect it to be some like grandiose thing that's going to boost your show in incredible amounts. You may have a few people that currently listen on other platforms that might migrate over to listening on YouTube. So that could be one possible thing that happens. And maybe you pick up a few new listeners from that added visibility or just being in a new place. It's not a bad way to go. One nice benefit is YouTube is actually making it, at the beginning of 2024, easier to convert podcasts to YouTube. It used to be a little bit more convoluted of a process and clunky, and now it's a little bit more automated, which is nice. You can't customize it very much, but at least it's automated and makes that decision a little bit easier for folks to want to go through that process of putting their show in the YouTube format. But what happens, Ben, is you're on a video platform and you're typically just putting up a static image of your show. And I don't know. I mean, we've all looked up music probably on YouTube before, right? And you have just the album art on display for the full 3 to 5 minute song. Yeah. And people will watch that and listen to that and engage in that. But that's also 3 to 5 minutes. Are you going to just sit there with a blank screen on YouTube and watch for, a long period of time? Yeah, probably not. By that same token, again, YouTube making strides. I do see it. YouTube's doing a little bit better job now because they're embracing podcasting a bit more, of allowing you to turn off your screen and keep listening to what content you're playing on the app. So I believe that doesn't work the same for everybody, but that is becoming a thing where you can continually play the video that you're watching even after you've turned off your screen. So that does mean that people could use YouTube in a format that's a little bit more like a traditional podcast app. So the larger that rollout happens and the more that functionality increases, that would spell better things for YouTube in the future also.
Let me stick to this audio only conversation a little bit, because I've seen it have a lot of success. I used to work at a radio station where we used to put a lot of our audio content onto YouTube and did nothing more than add a still image to it and just let the audio do the work. And it did really well, like beyond what I ever expected. I was shocked at how many people actually just listen to audio on YouTube. It blew my mind, honestly. But I think you got to think of it like this. If that's what you want to do, you have to have like a niche. You have to have something that people are going to search for or want to listen to no matter what. You can't just show up and throw your audio up there and then YouTube's going to start sending people to listen to it. I think that almost like using your music example, I think it's a good one. Like if you're somebody this big, if you're Taylor Swift, she's very popular right now, so I'll use her. You might even be a Swiftie, I don't know. No. Or somebody else is a big artist. I'm going to go just pull up their song and listen to it. It doesn't really matter what production value it has. I just want to hear the music. If you're a newer artist trying to break through, the more you can do, the more elements you can add to it, the better it looks, right? The more professional it looks. You have that visual element, the more likely it is to succeed than just throwing up your audio and hoping people find it. It's the same thing with the podcast, right? If you are someone that has a niche, a true niche, and you can service that niche on YouTube, you don't have to do a whole lot with it. You probably don't have to add a ton of video necessarily to get people to watch or listen. We have a Civil War podcast. It's a perfect example. We don't do any video with it. We just add some pictures to it. But it's such a niche podcast, and it's a great storytelling podcast that people can pull it up and listen, and they're gonna find it. If we add video elements to it, is it going to blow up to a different level? I don't know. We'll probably try and see what happens at some point. But I don't know what the answer to that is. I know that it's doing really well as it is in audio form. So if you can have a lot of success audio only. But if you don't have a niche, if you're just trying to find your spot, find your footing, try to find a place on YouTube, the answer is almost always going to be you need to add video. You need to do it the right way and use YouTube for what it is to get the most out of the show. It's going to take more commitment. Yeah. It's going to be a little more expensive. It's going to take a little more time. But if you do it the right way, you're going to have a much better chance of success than just throwing up the audio, crossing your fingers that it shows up in the algorithm and then it takes off. That to me, that's what ultimately the audio only discussion comes down to for me, is figuring out, do you have a show that truly people want to find no matter what, or do you need a way to separate yourself through those video elements?
All great points, Ben, and I'll piggyback off of that a little bit. To just say, if you're audio only show, one other compelling reason to put your show on YouTube is going to take place in the beginning of 2024, and that is the disappearing of Google Podcasts. So Google, we know, owns YouTube, and as part of that umbrella of under Alphabet and all that, they are getting rid of Google Podcasts, and instead they're going to try and push all of their audio only consumption over to YouTube Music. So that confuses people sometimes. There was Google Podcasts, there's YouTube Music for music stuff, and then there's YouTube itself. Now they're getting rid of Google Podcasts, and they're only going to have YouTube and YouTube Music. Podcasts will be on both platforms, video versions on YouTube, audio versions on YouTube Music, and you can kind of subscribe in both locations. I'm still even a little unclear about how they're going to roll it all out and make it look. But one good thing to know, and one reason to be on YouTube, is when you are on YouTube, it will automatically then put you into YouTube Music. And that now will be the only way to be on the YouTube Music app, is to go through putting it on YouTube. So the reasons for being on YouTube, even as an audio-only podcast, no matter how we're kind of shaping this debate, I can say the reasons for being on there are increasing as we go into 2024.
Yeah. So let's
it's still not going to be something that moves your needle incredibly, but still it increases the reason for doing it.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about benefits. So let's say you've gone through these initial questions, right? You've laid out your goals. You've answered the question of whether or not you have a channel. You've discussed the video element. Are you going to add video or not? And let's say you are willing to commit, if it needs to 6 months, a year to do podcasts. So yeah, let's talk about some more of those benefits. And I'm just going to, I hate to be the Debbie Downer here and start negative, but I'm going to, because I think it's important, and we do this all the time. It's just
is this a negative benefit that you're throwing out?
No. But it's just setting expectations, right? I think that's the biggest thing for anything that you do, and we do it all the time, right? It's about setting expectations, right? Don't go into this thinking, dude, it's January, I'm starting the new year. By March, and we have a channel that's going to be making me some money. So the monetization is a huge, huge positive for YouTube. Mm-hmm. It's a great positive. If you're doing it right, and there are plenty of people that make a lot of money off of YouTube, stupid amounts of money off of YouTube. You're probably not going to be that person, right? But you can get to a point where you are able to generate some revenue just by doing this content and putting it on YouTube. But it's going to take some time. Like I would be shocked. 6 months, I think, would be a very, very optimistic goal for being able to get to monetization, because you basically need 1,000 subscribers. There are options for monetization some things you can do at 500 subscribers, and some other, it's like watch time and videos uploaded, that sort of thing. There's a few other benchmarks you got to hit, but that's not really what you're looking for. The 1,000 subscribers is going to throw the ads in and do the stuff that you want without having to do a lot of the other work to it. So 6 months is very optimistic. I mean, even a year, you might not have that revenue turned on. But the good thing is, though, once you can get to that point, right, you're able to build on that, and it can continue to compound once you get there. But just know going into it, the monetization is great. You can make a little bit of money there, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen immediately.
Yeah, you can have a successful channel that never goes past 1,000 subscribers.
Absolutely.
And it be good for your business and be worth doing, and it never makes $1 in monetization. Because again, most of the people that we're working with, Ben, at least, they're selling a product, a service, and they're trying to get clients, help clients go through their sales process. So becoming profitable on YouTube from a pure ad standpoint is not all that important for a lot of folks. For those who are good and maybe have some successful shows that go viral and they get a little bit of that bump, or they do have a little bit broader audience maybe that gets brought into the fold, I mean, I think a great goal is just using that monetization to then offset the production costs,
right.
what it's taking you to produce the content, to serve your clients, and to do all those. Well, if that monetization can start offsetting that cost a bit, hey, that's a big win, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And it's going to open up some avenues, right? I mean, even if you don't generate any money, like you said, one of the benefits, and we've heard firsthand, I can't remember the person it was, wouldn't share anyway, but they had a lot of success where they had somebody that told them, like, I watched 4, 5, 6 year videos back to back to back, and wanted to come in and work with you. And it's the same kind of thing as a podcast, right? And most of the time there's your podcast there, but there are people that do kind of separate videos.
I've all the time have shared the feedback in podcasting, specifically podcasting. People are going to consume a bunch of your episodes over a short period of time and probably decide whether to become a client or not after listening to that batch of episodes pretty quickly. That's the feedback we get all the time. Oh, I went through and I listened to 5, 10 of your podcasts, and I want to work with you. Very common feedback. I feel like YouTube is going to be even more, because, and especially if you're doing short form YouTube videos, people can crank through those very quickly. And their nature of kind of playing one to the next, and just they're easy to consume. And we all have gotten lost down YouTube rabbit holes before. So I would imagine people would make up their mind very quickly after seeing a couple of YouTube videos. That translates really well from the podcast world, and something that is still going to hold true on the YouTube side.
We already talked about the added exposure, searchability. That's a big plus for YouTube, right? One of the reasons when you do it. But I also think the other kind of benefit too is just the ability to build a community. If that's something you're looking for, right? That lacks in the podcasting world. You can't open up a podcast and communicate or share comments. You can leave a review, right? But you can't leave comments and go back and forth with people about a subject. So if that's something you're looking for, I think that's a great avenue. And I also think you should embrace it. If that's something you want to do, be in the comments, leave comments, answer people's questions, thank people, just be active. It's just like any other social media, right?
Yeah.
If you're there and you're part of the conversation, it's going to become more active. People know they'll get a response, and but you don't want to pay attention to every comment. Probably there's going to be plenty of garbage there if you ever get enough. But the key is to embrace it and be a part of it. And the more you put in, the more you'll get out.
Well, that's the beauty of that format. We've seen this in the old school way when, like we do radio shows, right? And when a prospect calls in to get some free consultation or a booklet or something like that from a radio program, they will, sometimes the advisor or the host will call that person back. This happens a lot to some of our real estate agents as well when they call back their clients. They're like rock stars to those people that call in, and then when they're getting a call back from the advisor, from the host of that show, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's you." There's this like star factor. Well, translate that to the YouTube world. You're watching. I watch a lot of YouTube these days. I kind of realized it one day. I was like, wow, I have made the switch to consuming a ton of stuff on YouTube now. I know YouTubers. I consume a ton of things on YouTube, and I'm even becoming like a fan of certain content creators on YouTube. There's this one photography content creator that I really. Yeah. I'm getting into the hobby of photography, and there's this particular guy out of Canada that I found, but he's the one that I've learned the most off of. Talk about this, Ben. I probably consumed 20 to 30 of his photography videos, and then he was promoting a course where he'll teach you everything he knows about wildlife photography from start to finish. And I signed up for that course. So it is a perfect example of how building a channel, building content, and then having kind of that call to action work beautifully. Bought the course, loved it, engaged with it. When his videos come out, I'm dropping whatever I'm doing and watching them. It's pretty cool how you can become a fan like that. My gosh, if he ever actually, like, if I don't do a lot of commenting on YouTube, but if I commented and then he commented, I'd be like, whoa, that was so cool. And so, like, if advisors can realize that, like, people are consuming your material, they're engaging with you, they want that back and forth, and it will only snowball. It will only roll over on itself. More and more people will see, oh, wow, he responds to comments. That makes me want to ask my question. So interaction on YouTube might sound like a bunch of extra work, but it's really worth doing if you're a client and you're going down that route.
Yeah, and this is something that you should be doing if you're going to do YouTube. If you have the ability, compliance-wise, to do it, something you should be doing. All right,
there's the compliance component, but cross those bridges when we come to them, right?
Right. All right, let's close it out then with some reasons why you wouldn't. We've touched on some of them, right? If you're only doing audio only and there's nothing else you're going to put there, if you're going to start a channel just to put audio on there, probably not going to get a lot out of it. If you're not going to do a lot more content outside of what you're doing, not going to get a lot out of it. If you're not going to leverage YouTube for what it is, I mean, and we're not talking about just putting video up, right? It's about putting banner art up, right? Creating playlists, getting a trailer, getting some upload defaults, customize the channel. There's a lot of steps to building a YouTube channel. The onboarding process of YouTube is enough to have some people go, is it really worth doing this?
Yeah. That can be a barrier. Shameless self-promotion, right, will help people optimize their YouTube channel, get it launched, all as part of the onboarding process of working with us so that you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, just like in anything, if it's a heavy lift up front, it can stop a lot of people from even trying it out or going down that road in the first place. This one's debatable, Ben. I've heard so many different people kind of have two sides to this. Some say it's not that big of a deal. Some say it is a big deal. This goes back to the audio only on YouTube. One reason to not do it would be if you have a successful channel already, or you're hoping to create a successful channel, because audio only shows tend to have a lot of people click, hoping, and then they see that there's no video component. They click away very quickly. It takes your watch time and really shortens it. And YouTube algorithms think that that's really important, is the watch time. You want to have the bigger watch time, and you don't want to have a lot of people clicking away immediately, because YouTube kind of reads that, I guess, Ben, is like, it must have been clickbait. It must have not been very engaging. And so we're not going to recommend this video to other people because the first few people that interacted with it didn't like it and clicked away. That can hurt you and hurt your overall channel's performance if you're putting up an audio only show and it's having that kind of response from people that it's getting in front of. So that could be an argument against it. Now, if you aren't doing a lot on YouTube and you just want it to be there for people to find, that's not a big deal for you. But if you've already had a successful show and you've got a lot of moving parts and you've got a good audience, do you want to now blast that audience with a bunch of non-video stuff? May not be the right solution for you.
Yeah, it's worth weighing the cost to do that. But I still, ultimately, my thought is that if it's good content, it'll win out in the long run. But yes, to your point, if you're already putting the time in elsewhere, probably worth putting a little extra time and resources into making that a video podcast just to complement everything else you're doing.
Yeah.
Also,
podcast stats don't count your YouTube views. So if you're a stats-centric person, YouTube's cool because it has a lot of stats, but it's not going to integrate in with your other podcasting stats. You're going to have to constantly kind of doing that math a little bit to see how a show is performing. Yeah. Also, you can't download. I mean, you can download YouTube videos, but it's not as common of a practice as it would be in the in the space of a podcasting world. So somebody can't listen to your YouTube video offline. They've got to be connected, which does make it more difficult for people to consume on the go. Again, that's getting a little bit better with being able to turn the screen off and listen to an episode. That's going to be more and more commonplace. But just a couple of those other things to be mindful of.
So let's finish off with some advice. Just general advice. Walter, what would you tell someone that asks this question? Should I take my podcast right now that I'm doing and put it on YouTube?
Yeah, I think the big advice is I say yes. I think it's fine. If you do an audio only podcast, I think it's okay to put it on YouTube unless there's just this compelling reason not to do it. I think it's okay to have it in that existing space. Just go into it with those proper expectations.
Yeah.
If you're going to actually do a video podcast where you're truly going to be on camera like us, I think you just have to be prepared. It's not. I think the answer is yes. Go do it. That sounds amazing. We love it. That's going to be where all the growth is happening in our business. Ben, is in YouTube and video space. It's where the world is moving. I think if you're not heading in that direction, there's a possibility you can be late to the game or be left behind. But you got to be prepared for what comes along with it. So if we were doing an audio only podcast today, Ben, we would have showed up in shorts and underwear, and because we're on video, we threw something on with a collar. I had to go clean up my background a little bit so it wasn't as messy. I have a box that I pushed off to the side. We just have to be a little bit more on. I've got a bright light shining in my eyes where I wouldn't have that on if I was just doing an audio podcast. It's going to take longer for our team to edit and put this conversation together. So for a client, it's going to be more expensive to produce a show. There's more man hours. The skill level is higher to execute all of this stuff, to manage all of the back end. So you have to just make sure that that commitment is then worth it to align with your goals. And that's the part of the conversation I love having with people, Ben, because there are people where, the world's saying go do video, but if you hate doing video, you have no interest in being on camera, and your goals just don't align with the type of growth that YouTube can bring. You just want something that services your clients, and you're fine with audio only, and that's where you want to live because you're more comfortable there. Great. And that's the answer. That's the best thing to do. So it's kind of like on a previous podcast, we talked about aligning what the world says you should do, what's truly right for your business versus what your capacity is, and kind of bringing those three things together to see what's the right move for you. That's the advice, is just seeing what's the best fit for you.
Yeah. Not a lot else I can add to that. I mean, just kind of walking through these questions that we've asked and the process we'd go through. If you answer enough of those yeses, I think it's a great goal to have. If you can get there and you can commit to it, I think it's absolutely something you want to do. And I think it's fun. I think when you get into it and you're involved in the stats and you see the comments and kind of watch how the videos perform, and you have a video or two take off early on, it's a lot of fun, right? And it can motivate you to do more and commit more time to it. So ultimately, I think it's a good thing, but you do need to make sure you address some of these things and make sure you are tackling it the right way, or it's truly not going to be a good use of your time. We want to keep expectations in check, but if we're talking about ceilings, your ceiling on YouTube is miles and miles higher than it is in the podcast space. Podcasting is very fractured, so it's hard to go viral in podcasting. It's just not designed that way as much. You have so many different apps. They all have different rules. They all have different ways to stand out. They all have different SEO considerations. It's really hard to create a product that can work on every podcasting app and even work on a single podcasting app, just because they are so fractured. You're never going to have your audience all in one place. It would almost be beneficial for us, Ben, right, if just like Apple Podcasts won the podcast battle and just everyone else left and everyone could just consolidate under one app. Wouldn't that be, that would actually be really great for us, right? Maybe not great for the end consumer who wants options, but it would help us be able to tailor things to one platform. Well, that's what YouTube is. That's the one place you're going to go to consume all of this video, all of that content. And so your ceiling is much higher. The amount of people that are watching YouTube videos is like 2 billion. I think was the stat I saw just within the last couple of days. I saw something like 2 billion monthly users. Maybe that's not the right verbiage, but it's a lot. A lot of people are on YouTube and consuming that content. And we've seen this in some of our most recent shows. You mentioned the Civil War show, did amazing in the podcast only space, the audio only space. But Ben, we put it on YouTube, and within the first month, it had surpassed its lifetime downloads from audio only, or views and listens. Yeah, a show that's been around for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And so
1 month they caught up.
Just right there. And he has now multiple videos. The individual video has gotten more plays than the lifetime of all the audio podcasts only.
Yeah.
So that's one example of that power. We have had another client recently make the video podcasting switch, and I want to say they were averaging, 30 to 50 listens per show, maybe more than that on some episodes. And an episode we just put up a couple of days ago, last I checked, Ben, was already past 500, 600, something like that.
Over 1,000, yeah.
and now past 1,000 on YouTube. So again, just like way better performance on YouTube from a broader standpoint. I don't want this podcast to go on too much longer, Ben, but that doesn't necessarily mean, just go do YouTube because of some of the things that we've talked about, but also how local are you? How regional are you? Podcasting, you're going to grow with your very local, your very central email lists, your prospects, your clients. That's making up the core of your listenership. You know who's tuning into those because you're not just going randomly viral. On the YouTube space, you might be in Florida and be picking up a ton of views because of the algorithm and just where people are finding you from all over the country or even the world. So even though those views look more impressive, does it actually mean you're going to turn more people into clients?
Yeah, great point.
Think of that balance as you evaluate all this too. Don't just get distracted by the shiny view numbers.
Yeah, every view is not created equal, for sure.
That's a great way to put it.
Last, I'll finish with this thought. If you do want to do video, it needs to be on YouTube. Like you don't want to go somewhere else. If you say I'm going to do a video podcast, but I'm going to put it on Vimeo, just stick to YouTube. That's the route to go. But again, if you have questions or want to just talk about it, you're thinking about doing a podcast, thinking about doing YouTube, just kind of want to know what the commitment is, what it takes, and just kind of brainstorm a little bit. Happy to speak to you about it. thirdwheelmedia.com. There's links in the description for our show notes if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, go find us there. And please subscribe as well. We appreciate it. We'll try to do more of this content. And if you have any thoughts, anything you want us to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. We'll be in the comments. We're going to take our own advice. You might even run into Walter in the comments. And
Send us a DM. Send us a DM, right, Ben? Isn't that what the kids say?
That is what they say. Indeed. All right, we'll get out of here. Appreciate you watching, and thanks for being a part of the show. We'll have more to come. For Walter Storholt, I am Ben George at Third Wheel Media. Take care.